Good Lord. Um, yeah, well, it's a podcast once again. I was going to start this joke this joke of a podcast. I was going to start this podcast out by making fun of Silver, and she's not present.
She saw it coming and decided not to show up.
Coward.
Oh, isn't the best time to make fun of somebody is behind their back?
Yeah.
But
So
then
that's
you
what
can't feel the hurt in their voice. You know?
The thing is, I make fun of you guys behind your back. I make fun of Silver to her face.
Yeah.
Then I say nice things behind her back, and it confuses her.
Good. It's the best thing to do to somebody. Keep them guessing. Never know what's going on.
We are, I think, at a train station.
Damn right.
Particularly wet one.
Yeah, it's funny because it doesn't loop perfectly. That there's just a puddle appears below Jason, and my internal dialogue is that he's weeing.
No, yeah.
Lack
I
of
want some
bladder
fat
control.
zombies. I'm keeping them away.
Yeah, well,
They're only
around.
coming from one direction, and you've got it covered.
Got it covered.
There's always the people on the right. Silver's now green, despite the slight glow to her character, but there's none of it.
It's okay.
We're here back for another episode of the Strike Gamers podcast. As always, an immense amount of things to talk about. The news never ends. It never ends, and
It's weird how that works.
yeah. Well, there was a moment in the early 19th century, early 20th century, early 1900s, where they had a bit of news where it was like all of
Nothing
the news has
today.
happened. Nothing important happened today, which wasn't true. But they just had nothing to share.
Yeah. I got nothing for you, pal, but we still got to sell the paper.
Chat says must be in New York City because Mamdani has let base pipe maintenance go to crap. Maybe so. I mean, it is a fictional city, but your witty political commentary has gone noticed. I've been attempting to gaslight Chance constantly on Instagram about how gay he is.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's working.
Yeah,
I think he's second
sometimes you gotta
guessing
do it to
his sexuality and life choices, which is what my goal is.
Oh, that's good. It's a good goal. It's a good goal to have.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing you can do about it either. So if you can't tell from the thumbnail, so I was torn between a few different topics on what to discuss, but ultimately it comes down to me because I'm the only one who cares about this podcast. And I thought I would sit down and talk about how Chance says, problem is that I am rarely on Instagram. Well, you're also rarely straight, sir.
True. These are facts. I've heard them from one source.
A reliable source. Me.
Reliable, true source.
Super accurate. So there's been a few bits of news, and the one I settled on is sort of opens up to a general discussion about the state of comic books at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts out with a interview that Jim Lee had. Now, if you don't know who Jim Lee is, Jim Lee was originally a huge player in Marvel,
Right.
who there was a time in comic books in like the 90s where comic book artists were basically rock stars.
Seriously.
They were swarmed. They would go to signings. There would be people down the street. Like, I can't tell you how ridiculously popular comic book artists were at the height of comics before the market crashed and it was really stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim Lee, as well as a bunch of other comic book artists, formed their own comic book company because they wanted more personal control to tell the stories they want to and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, they're the Rolling Stones or whatever, and they can do what they want to. It's Imagine Comics. And that comic book company ended up doing McFarlane's Spawn. They did The Walking Dead. They did Invincible. They did a lot of different stuff. And Jim Lee was a part of
track
it.
record.
Right. And Jim Lee was a part of it. And Jim Lee was there for a while. And after disagreements between a bunch of people, he left the indie comic book environment and ended up leaving to DC. And he's currently the creative director of DC Comics.
Okay.
So, I mean,
okay.
and good for him.
Sure.
But there's been some criticism about how he's managed things during COVID. Instead of releasing new and great stuff, he released an art book of the art he has done.
Okay.
And Jim Lee, if I recall, was the one that got a lot of criticism for his Captain America with the giant chest.
Oh, that him? Oh,
Yeah.
my God, even I know that.
Yeah. And it's like, look, there's art he's done I like, but whatever. Anyway, being the head of DC and sort of structured with comic books. Actually, let me at least lay some groundwork for you. If you're listening to this nerdy podcast and you're rolling your eyes at comic books, I don't know why you're listening to a nerdy podcast, but let's set that aside. Comic books are part of America's mythology. They are the Iliad and the Odyssey for Americans. They are part of the mythos of storytelling and whatnot. Comic books are what set up a lot of storytelling that existed in other forms down the road. Comic books are what created the Marvel Universe with the biggest movies of all time showing up on your screen. So if you're a big fan of Iron Man, it all started with comic books. And comics were always meant to be cheap for children initially.
Yeah.
Or for young men. Like, believe it or not, prior to the advent of Marvel and DC, things like pulp comics and stuff were actually very popular nationwide, so it wasn't really restricted to just children. But they're meant to be very cheap, which is why they were loose staple paper, which is why some of the best comics, the oldest comics, haven't survived. It's because they're loose
They
pieces.
never were meant to.
Right, they're not. They're meant to be throwaway little fun stories. That's sort of the origin of where we get comics. And Jim Lee's involvement here is at the highest level in DC, at the decline of the comic book industry. Okay.
Well, one thing that I wanted to touch on really quickly was your use of the word pulp. It literally comes from the fact that they used like the cheapest paper they could get to make these comics.
Yes. Chance says when comics got to $5 an issue, I dipped out. $5 was too much for a kid, even a young guy.
Yeah.
I was like, and I wanted to read Spider-Man and Batman and stuff. It's just, you get to $5 for what amounts to half an advertisement and then a little bit of a story, and you don't get the full story. And they're just taking advantage of the fact that people were dedicated to this stuff and were willing to fork out the money. And as prices went up, and we have to have full color. And it's like, you don't always necessarily have to have full glossy color. Regardless.
They used to have 3 or 4 panel Spider-Man comics every day in the newspaper.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a thing. Regardless of all of this, I want at least a bit of groundwork established so we can talk about Jim Lee and the commentary he had with the comic book industry. I don't know why. Let's see.
Yeah, it's interesting now that since the advent of comics, and we've gotten into, like you said, the golden age and all that stuff, and we're really seeing the decline of comics right now, how people have really gotten into the whole collector's aspect of comics because of things like Amazing Comics Volume, or whatever, number 1 or whatever it is, where you have the introduction of Superman or whoever it happened to be, and just the way now that they've really gone maybe overboard on a lot of this stuff, where you've got variant covers and people are not even opening the comics. I mean, I remember when the Death of Superman hit, my friend's dad went out and bought the Death of Superman, and they put it away. Nobody was allowed to touch it. Nobody's allowed to read it. It was put in a drawer.
And all these criticisms are fair. If you haven't listened to the podcast, enough, we tend to open up topics and go a little bit too meta sometimes. I would like to focus on specifically what he's talking about and the issues of the comic book industry today. Chance has a comment. It's crazy how comics and toys were once the domain of children and now both are adult-oriented industries by and large. Well, there's a few reasons. Pricing out. Because only adults can do it. You'll find with a lot of hobbies, adults that are into were stuff that they couldn't afford as a kid. And so they can afford it now and they're buying it up. I mean, the blow up of Pokemon prices, kid can't afford this. They can't.
No.
And it's not a child practice. I sold a bunch of Dragon Ball Z cards recently. It was adults that were interested. Very expensive, high-end Dragon Ball Z cards from the game. And the guy was asking me, he's like, oh, well, do you collect and stuff? I was like, no, I played the game. I bought these.
Battle-tested cards, bud.
Well, I had a guy who was like, well, where'd you get it? And I was like, I opened them when I bought the decks at the time. Like,
oh,
I know what you're confused about, but that's how I got these cards is I opened them at the time. And I was like, do you play it? And he's like, no, I just collect it. And I was like, well, that's weird.
That's really weird.
It is.
I mean,
that is
because that implies he never played it. Because if I had, like, let's say it was you buying this stuff and somebody asked you that, you'd be like, well, I did when I was young and now I just collect it. But that implies he's never played it, ever.
No,
and it's
he
like,
just wants them.
Okay.
Yeah, so
that must have been like talking to an alien from Mars.
Well, and look, I understand the rarity and value and all these sorts of things that creates a desire to buy lots of cards, and it creates this whole secondary market. It destroys long-term these hobbies. It destroys customizable card games because you have to be able to sit and play with the cards. It destroys the comic book industry because it prices out people, and then eventually you've got just regurgitated garbage, long-term like there are huge issues. But let's address. Well, first, Chance has a comment. I still have multiple bagged copies of Superman 75, and they're worthless outside of the giggle value. I didn't get the Superman where he died. I got the one afterwards, the white bagged one, and I opened it. And I remember a friend at the time being like, you opened yours? Because he had them. And I was like, you opened yours? I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, those could be collector's items. And this was during the time of comic books being huge in the 90s. And I was like, I opened it because I wanted to read it, because I wanted to know what happened. Not because I was obsessed and I wanted to turn this into flip it years later and it'd be a huge amount of value. And that's what's so weird about the comic book industry, or at least these hobbies today, is they're not buying it for the love of it. They're buying it for the investment or whatever. And those who love it have been pushed out because of the industry. Once again, let's pivot back to the actual reason we're here is Jim Lee's commentary. Okay, Jim Lee, DC Comics President, Chief Creative Officer and Publisher, spoke to Nikkei X Trend about his career, current trends, blah, 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 blah. Lee says Japanese storytelling and Asian content more broadly is booming because young people want to discover something that is uniquely their own, perhaps rather than just inherit current trends, and because of the nature of the stories compared to Western comics. Thus, this is a quote, the stories told in Japanese manga and anime are incredibly powerful. I often find myself wondering what is missing in Western comics and why aren't they able to achieve the same flavor. Also, I think manga has an advantage over American comics, which are mostly about superheroes, and that's where the majority of sales and readers are concentrated. In Japan, it's closer to literature, and anyone can read it. And it's not just hero stories, there's much wider range of genres, like stories about cooking and soccer. You can draw stories from that. So I'm very happy that manga has been so successful because it gives me a goal to aim for. The manga market is bigger than our industry, so the question becomes, what can we learn from this? Lee says that it's not just art style, but the sensibility of Japanese stories, and later adds, another thing to add is that in the West, comics and animation have been considered children's media. As people grow up, they move on to live action, but in Japan, that's not the case. Not only is there a wide range of genres, but adults also read manga and watch anime as a culture. Is an art that isn't limited to a specific group. All right, Jim. So
Okay.
I understand the tendency to sit and lament that manga is doing so much better than American comics, and that they have a lot less restriction because they can tell stories about anything they want to, and that all they can do is tell comic book stories. Here's the problem, and if you listen to a lot more of his commentary, he talks about how they have longer narratives that begin and end, as well as other grievances. This is a problem with you. It's not with them, and that they're able to do so much stuff. I understand that you're trapped in a universe of American comic book writing that is structured around, well, we have to sell these comics and stuff. Guess what? You can tell shorter stories about a character, and the story can begin and end. You don't have to write a story about a character that never dies and goes on forever. And in fact, you know what's part of the problem? Is you've created characters that you refuse to kill. That if you kill, they come back 5 minutes later, so there's no threat to the universe. And you might go, well, no, you were a part of this from the beginning, from the height of comic book industry. You are as much at fault as anybody else, Jim, for the situation you find yourself in, where you're like, well, we're trapped by this situation where they can write these concentrated stories that have a beginning and end. And you know, you're in the situation where you can't kill some of the big main characters. And I was like, well, whose fault is that? That's not my fault. You've taken away the threat of death from your universe.
Yeah.
You know what you still can do in the universe you have right now? You can write a superhero that has an arc and dies. Right now. You can do that right now. And whose restriction is that? Is it ours? Is it the manga? Is it their fault because they've been more creative than you? And what I hear from this is the lack of creativity, the lack of ability to actually move beyond your constraints. Because he's looking at the manga, it's like, well, they could do all this stuff, and you know, a wider range of people read it. And it's like, adults read your comics. In fact, I would say adults exclusively read hero comics. You don't think adults don't want more interesting content? You don't think adults don't want more adult-oriented stuff? And you might sit here and lament it. It's like, well, every time we try to create something new that's not Spider-Man or Batman or Superman, people don't like it. And it's like, well, here's the thing. That's because those comics suck, Jim. You write characters that are enraptured by current political nonsense, who are characterized by the fact that it's their identity, it's the intersectionality of the characters, and then you sit there and go, oh, well, I don't know why young people aren't into comics. It's pandering, and the comic book industry has already been destroyed by years of bad storytelling. And yet you're going to say, well, you know, manga can do all this stuff that we can't do. It's like, what can they do exactly that you can't do? Guess what? You could tell a story about sports. You can write comics about sports. Yeah. You can do that. Yeah. And guess what? You can change up your format. They don't have to be paper comics. You could do little books like the manga do. You can do this. You know what you can do that would blow your mind? You could go find manga artists and collaborate with them and their writers and write a Spider-Man manga.
Oh, yeah.
And a full story arc with a beginning, middle, and an end. You can do these things. But you're going to sit here and lament, well, you know, we're going to have to learn some stuff from manga. You were the biggest thing in town and you blew it. And this is what I find across multiple industries. They took for granted their audience, the people that consume their product, and they blew it. And now they're sitting here lamenting, we're no longer, you know, nobody wants to read our stuff. Look how popular Japanese stuff is. I could scream about this forever, but I'm going to bring in some commentary, and then I've got a bunch of other stuff to say. But.
Yeah, it's very, I don't know, and does he know about bande dessinée? Does he know about French comics? Because they make all sorts of things that are much closer to American sensibilities. Yeah. Westerns, sci-fi. They make Disney comics. Disney comics. And you know what's funny? I remember when we were going through my grandma's house. She had a lot of stuff from when my mother and my aunts were young, were kids. And you know what was in there in just droves? Was Disney comics. There was tons of them, and they were all well loved. Gone. I mean, like, have they made those in the last 20 years? Even I don't know. They did in France.
They made them in the States. I think they still make them in Europe.
Yeah, they see. There you go. And it's just, I mean, if you Disney is American. Disney is arguably a vision of America, and yet we can't, like, two of the most American things, comics and Disney, we can't sell those here? Why?
Apparently, Donald Duck is a long-running American series in France.
Yeah, that's so funny. And it's
in Italy,
like,
too.
Like,
I
why
have,
not here?
I have several comic books of Donald Duck as a superhero. They're all Italian. He fights crime. He puts on the mask and cape, and he's a Batman style. He's got the gadgets and all that kind of thing. So I've got maybe 20 issues or so.
See, and that's awesome. And what's funny is some of this stuff we did do, just not in the world of comics. I mean, that we did this stuff with like cartoons for kids, but we can't, like, why not in comics? Why not keep this going in comics? I mean, not to get too far ahead, or I don't want to go off the beaten track here, but, like, I don't know. I'll save it. I'll save that for later, but I'll let Jason mosey in.
Before we have a couple stupid comments from Chance. Chance goes, Spider-Man, Spider-Manga?
Wow.
You freaking child.
Quality.
And then he goes, so Darkwing Duck? Darkwing Duck is a different duck, sir.
Oh.
Get your ducks
How
together.
dare you?
Anyway.
It's definitely not Darkwing Duck. He has the blue and black color scheme. He doesn't have the big hat. He still has Donald's little sailor hat. Anyway, so there's a couple things that I was thinking while you were going through his comments, and a couple of things that jumped out to me was the fact that he's sitting there saying that, you know, we can't do what the manga artists can do. I was like, well, why not? Why can't you?
See, that was my biggest grievance. He says, well, they could do all the stuff that we can do. It's like, what? Who says you can't do any of that?
Ain't you the boss? Ain't you the boss, pal?
Yeah.
Why not?
Because there's no problem with having a story, a Batman story, a Superman story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's just a comic book arc. So what if you the next month you start a new Superman story? It doesn't have to connect backwards to the previous story. It can be its own self-contained story. There's nothing that says that we have to make sure that all of our comics are maintaining this continuity throughout. I mean, yes, you don't want to, like, upset and give Superman powers in one comic and then take them away in another one. So there has to be that style of we've got to make sure that Superman's power set doesn't change or whatever. But there's nothing that says we can't have a story, tell a story, and then stop, and then tell a new story.
Well,
But,
they're constrained by their industry. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The other thing that I was thinking was that, as you said, they've done this to themselves. There's no reason why I, as a comic book fan when I was a little kid, wouldn't then carry that comic book fandom to my children. You know, I'm an adult. My children may not be able to buy the comics because you've priced them out of the industry. But as an adult, I still like comics. I can still buy comics and I can give them to my kids. But you've made that almost impossible for me because I don't want to infect them with your ick. You know what I mean? Every time you release something, it's like, ew, ick. I don't want to read that. Why would I want my kids to read that? Tell a good freaking story. I'll read it. So will my kids. You're the one that's saying we can't do this. Well, yes, you can, and you did it, but you did it to yourself.
These are fair points. One thing we tend to diatribe is go on the greater issues of a lot of these things happen. I want to address specifically what he's saying. And when it comes to storytelling, look, I understand he's in an industry where comic book superheroes have sort of gone down this road of you can't change them. When you change the lore, people get upset, and you can't write certain stories because the people don't like the stories that you write. First of all, I would say that you lack creativity and the ability to create interesting stories. You just do. I've heard people sit there. Who was it that James Gunn who said all the stories that you can tell about Batman have been told? I was like, horseshit. What do you? All the stories about Batman have been told. Nonsense.
Can you imagine if that had been the attitude when they were making the Arkham Asylum games?
Yeah.
Well, we can't. It's already been done. Everything's been done. It's like, well, no, not really. As is evidenced by those games, frankly. And you know what? Sometimes it's good to give the people what they want, but that's a whole other discussion. But like you can make up something new. Why not?
Yeah. There's nothing constraining you except for the fact that you've established a world of expectation. Well, these are the superheroes that work, these that don't. And look, I get it. You've tried to write new superheroes and get them to work, and then they crash and fail. And the only ones people want to read are the Spider-Man, the Batman, the Superman, your established heroes. And every time you try and write a new hero, they don't work.
Why is that?
Well, sure. Before we get there, and I understand this with your bad heroes that you're not doing, and then you try and piggyback those new heroes on established heroes, and then try and steal their mojo. You went through a huge era in Marvel where nearly every character was stealing a gimmick from another one.
Yeah.
Thor was now female Thor. Iron Man was now Ironheart. The Incredible Hulk was now Korean. And Spider-Man is now a black Spider-Man. You lack the ability to create original characters, and you just steal the gimmicks from other characters. And yet I can still hear your voice in the background. We tried to make new characters, and they didn't like it. Well, it's because your characters are bad. And guess what? You don't live or die on the gimmick. You live or die on the storytelling. Write a story that's a lot humbler and a lot more basic and tell a good story. And guess what? One of the biggest flaws of the comic book industry is the format itself. Comics are too expensive. Yes. They're half advertisements and they're too expensive. Yeah, but tradition. Who cares at this point?
Yeah. You want industry or tradition?
Yes. Right. Black and white little books like Manga.
Yeah.
Sell those. Get those characters established. Sell good stories. You were going to intervene there, Ross.
Oh, it's just like, yeah, I mean, like, would you rather have an industry or tradition? And on top of that, like, I mean, there's another aspect of it, too. And they know they do this on occasion, but, like, there's, like, how many different Batmans are there, like, a year? Because I know right now there's, like, what do they call it? Absolute
Batman's
Batman.
The big one.
Yeah,
then there's, like, that's the only Batman. Comic sailing right now is Absolute Batman.
Right, and it's like you make your lines confusing. The stories are, like convoluted, and, like, because you keep either resetting, depending on the company, because I know there's differences, like, on how they operate with this sort of thing, but, like, either you keep resetting, or you keep, like, if somebody comes to you, thankfully there's a couple of good books that, if somebody's like, hey, I want to read Batman, what do I go with? And Rhett, what do you tell them?
Dark Halloween, Long Halloween, and then there was the...
like Dark Knight Returns.
Dark Knight Returns, and there was a bunch of comics.
And thank God those Batman good books are there
1.
That are like full complete stories. Like, thank God, because otherwise, can you imagine trying to get into this shit now?
No.
Oh my gosh, just the worst. Yeah. And like that's another aspect of it too. Like maybe especially because so many stories have been uncompleted and like peter out after a while. Maybe you get like a whole arc in a book, and you can sell the bigger book if you're like too like not sure that it's going to work. You know what I mean? Like there's a million different ways you can try and sell these things that they're just not doing.
I think some of it also is it seems that they're not planning very well.
No, I don't think so.
I could be completely wrong about that, but I'm thinking that they're taking cues from movies and they don't have the full plot worked out from the beginning. And so when it gets to the end, it's like it peters out because there was poor planning in the story process.
Kinda. I can tell you how it is going right now. But to read Chance's comments really quickly, he says, you could write a story about Superman that farts cheeseburgers, whose only weakness is pencil shavings. Jim, literally nothing is stopping you. Shaking my head. You're absolutely right. The creativity is actually infinite. There's nothing stopping you from the type of stories you can create. Sure, it's going to sound like, hey, heroic story where you fight a bad guy is going to sound like, well, we've heard this before. Yeah, but you can make it interesting. You don't even have to have a spin, like a Shyamalan spin on it. You can just you can just create a good, well-written story. Guess what? The most basic story of a hero trying to stop a villain, if well-written, can be better than some of the most complex stories written out there. And Chance says what he means is he can't do it and makes pile of money. All entertainment becomes formulaic. You're not wrong. You're not wrong that he can't do it. And that's the problem is he can't do it.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is he's top dog, right? He doesn't need to do it. He's got people to do it, but he's hiring the wrong people.
Well, and they went through I know it's a meme to be like, oh, woke, but the woke era had a huge influence on storytelling.
Yeah.
Everybody from the top down told them that this is where young people are going. They hugely care about identity politics and intersectionality. And then that infected itself in all of these forms of media. But the problem is what they were told wasn't true. And that infection just got, it killed a lot of companies because they were told by middle managers and people looking at social media that this is the direction that the culture is going and we need to get on board. Young people hugely care about LGBTQ issues, and then they infect it into the comic books, whether you agree with it or not. And then the people who read those comics flee because they don't want to see their characters involved in these things. We got invested in characters like Tim Drake, who had been straight for decades and is suddenly gay. And it's like, so I'm supposed to stay committed to your universe, especially when I'm not involved in those politics. And it's like, well, what you could do is you could write a gay character and make them really interesting, give them an interesting story. Well, nobody wants to read that. So your solution is to destroy already established characters. That's your solution. Right. Because no one's interested, so we're going to retroactively ruin characters that people are already reading. And all that succeeds in doing is people fleeing those comics. You need to take established characters seriously. Understand that their lore matters to fans of those comics. And when you ruin it, when you disrespect the lore, they leave. They walk away. And this is what we've established now, is a fleeing fan base. And I don't want to make the meta argument, but you will see this repeated in other industries where you disrespect the industry and then they just walk away. Here's one thing I would like to point out, though. Well, comic books, we have this problem where everybody just expects the same stories over and over again, and it gets boring. And have you read manga? Have you? Do you know what's one of the stupidest problems in manga? They do the same thing over and over and over again. My lord, the amount of times I've run into isekais where it's become such a trope that even the characters comment, hey, it's like I've been reborn into a world like one of those manga I read. They even know it's a trope in the world that they're born into. Manga has gotten so formulaic that they find a trend like, hey, you've been taken into a real video game, and if you die in the video game, you die for real. And then we get 40 versions of that because that becomes super hype. And then the isekai becomes really attractive, and then we get 40 versions of isekai. that are all slightly different. Here's one where you're reborn as a hero, and you get kicked out of the hero's party, and then you try and become a farmer. And here's one where you get reborn and you're a farmer and you become the greatest farmer ever. And then here's one where you're reborn and you raise slimes. And here's one where you're reborn and you become a slime. And here's one where you're reborn and everybody hates you, and then you hate everybody else, and then you leave, and then they want you back because actually you're really important. And then I've just watched a mediocre to bad an anime where the isekai was he got born into a new world, and kind of the funny gimmick was he was like abnormally taller than everybody in the universe. He's like 7 feet tall compared to everybody else. And people run into it and go, "Oh, you're really tall." And it made me giggle because it's like, it's something. It's different, I guess. But the formulaic regurgitating, I understand that there are trends in the market. That what people want to see is they love that type of storytelling, and then they flood to that type of storytelling. Mm-hmm. Isekais are super hot right now. Are they kind of boring? Yes. But they're super hot right now. Guess what also exists in anime and manga? Interesting, weird stories, because they're not afraid to try and write something new and interesting. And there's actually a what's really healthy with manga is there's actually developmental period where it starts out and it shows up in like Shonen Jump or that sort of thing, and then it gets kind of an audience, and then maybe it'll go green light for maybe one book. And if there's enough sales, then that book might carry to another book. And then if there are enough books, because the sales stay consistent, then maybe it gets turned into an anime. And that there is trial period and gradualization. Whereas in Marvel, it's like, here's a person we hired just from college who has blue hair and has an agenda and is a big activist and wants to change the universe to her political agenda. We're going to give her a comic that's going to run 5-10 issues and get canceled because everyone hates it. And it's like, what a waste of time and money. There should at least be a degree of graduating from one to another, where you can start out as something and then grow from there. I know we're talking about manga at the moment, but I would like to address, I brought up with Jason sort of the storytelling aspect. It used to be where you would have like a year-long of stories in American comics with superheroes. And then near the end of maybe once a year, there was a big event where all of the heroes sort of had to deal with a big, massive threat. But with the dump of the industry, what has essentially occurred is instead of the big yearly threat, it's become like a quarterly, where they're constantly dealing with end of the world scenarios, because those end of the world scenarios give you bumps in the comic books, give you bumps in sales. So it's not that they're not planning, it's just they're now throwing everything at the wall. Everything at the wall. You have an end of the world scenario 5 times a year in American comic books, and it's really stupid.
Well, what I wanted to, so from that, one of the things that becomes apparent that is an issue is that they're no longer making their sales, and so they're desperate to make sales. So they're sitting there saying, "Well, what is it that makes us get sales? It's these world-ending things." If they were telling good stories along the way, they wouldn't need to do it 4 times, 5 times a year. They could do it once per year, like they had been doing, because that was actually sustainable at one time. They told good stories. People bought the comic books. It was sustaining them. They got a boost when they got to the world-ending event for the year, sure, but they don't need to do that. They do now because they're really telling these stories poorly. They're trying to make sure that politics rather than entertainment is front and center, and instead of drawing people in, they just keep pushing them away. Especially when they say things like, "Well, it's not for you," or "If you don't like it, go touch grass," or only real fans would XYZ. All of these things are like, well, fine, if you don't want my money, I'll take it somewhere else.
Well, and it's not just, I mean, the politics has been a huge part of it. It's not just the politics. It is the
But what I'm
issue of when they write a story.
quality,
So, for example, with Spider-Man, you would have a long-running, established familiarity with the character, his street-level
Mhm,
adventures, the things he does, all of these sort of backfill of character development.
right?
And now, if you're a new reader, you jump in and Spider-Man's going through the most dramatic, ridiculous, life-changing event ever, and you don't have the backfill of established lore
Nope.
to hold up the character. You're just running into, they're constantly destroying him every time you run
Mhm.
into a new little event for the character or a new bigger event for the character. Like he just recently went through him and Mary Jane are no longer married. She married a new guy
Right.
and they have a kid.
Ugh.
Or before that, Spider-Man uh, uh, disappeared and Dr. Octopus took his body and was running around as the Spectacular Spider-Man or whatever. And it's like, what are you doing to this poor guy?
Yeah.
Like, and I can't, if you don't character build, if you don't world build, and then you constantly run through one momentous event after the other, then the characters, there's nothing to build off of. And so how am I supposed to jump in partway into something that's destroying the character of Peter Parker when I haven't read the huge backstory? And there's an assumption that you have. This is not
Right.
encouraging new people to join. This is really scaring away old people from continuing and reading it.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I
I think a lot of that goes back to the storytelling aspect where they can't tell good stories anymore. And because they can't, it's like the creativity for them has fallen off a cliff. And because they can't create tell creative stories, they're focusing on the wrong aspect of the comic to put that front and center because they're creatively bankrupt, and they're giving us garbage instead, and we're going away in droves. And so, in order to try to win us back, they're having these big events, but these big events don't bring in repeat customers.
They just
Otherwise,
give you little spikes on the numbers.
yeah, yeah, that's all. They're
But
giving
in the
us
long
smoke
term,
for film.
it's destroying the established fans. Sorry, Ross, you were
Mhm.
going to jump in here.
oh no, I was just so and tell me if is it a I just wanted to mention the like where comics are sold. Is it alright if I bring that up now or should I hold off?
Go for it. I would
Well,
like to pivot back to the manga situation, but go for it.
you bet. Well, because it ties in with manga. Like, I can go to Barnes and Nobles and buy manga. It's a huge section now. Big.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
sell manga at Walmart.
Yep.
You know what they don't sell at either of those places?
Comic
Comic
books.
books.
Yeah, unless it's a big omnibus, they'll sell those. But like,
Yeah, they'll sell the graphic novels, the collections.
but anything no, they don't do that. And it's like they've, because I've heard from other people that like they they like pigeonhole themselves into this way of distributing their product that in the long term hurt it. I mean, before probably like when I was a very very small child and before that, you could get comic books at the 7-Eleven, the grocery
Mhm.
store, but that all went away for like certain kinds of distribution methods, i.e., very specific comic distributors and then comic shops. And I mean, they've completely shot themselves in the foot. Why would you do that? Meanwhile, I mean, literally, look, the things that sell right now that are like bound books are like manga and smut, and I can buy both of those at Walmart. So it's just baffling to me that they've pigeonholed themselves this way. Whereas manga, they'll sell it to you any way you want it. And I mean, look at gaming. What if gaming had decided no, only GameStop? You can only buy console games on GameStop, or even, God forbid, PC. But then, all of a sudden here comes Steam and just eats their lunch. And they act like, well, what happened? Yeah, well, I wonder what happened.
Well, Diamond did go out of business.
Yeah. Shocking it took that long. Anyway, I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention that.
No,
Because it's
no.
really fascinating to me. It's like, because every other industry, they want to Yeah, get it as many places as you can, but not this one.
Well, despite the repetitiveness and the regurgitating the same story and over again. I mean, I am so sick of hearing about the Demon King. I am sick of it. How many times do I got to run into a new story where it's like the Demon King's a bad guy, or maybe the Demon King is misunderstood, or maybe I work for the Demon King as a middle
Maybe the
manager.
Demon King's hot.
Maybe the Demon King
All
is
the
hot.
ladies want him.
Maybe I'm gonna be the new Demon King. Huh? You think about that?
Maybe I was reincarnated as the new Demon King, and I'm trying to take this in a new direction so that the hero doesn't kill me.
I saw one where the Demon King was reincarnated into a new universe.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, shut up about the Demon King. Guess what? These sell because they're kind of new stories. Yeah. They're decent. They're long form. Maybe people get into the art. Maybe get into some of the characters. Maybe young guys like, ooh, the girls are hot in this one or whatever. And a lot of the storytelling. Here's one kicker that you might find. A lot of the storytelling in manga, especially, shonen, because they're specifically for young men, cater to young men. Because young men like stories about adventure, and they get to vicariously live through the characters in some sort of power fantasy of what if I was the most powerful and all the girls were into me. That's why harems are a thing in manga. Do you know who is not getting anything to cater to them whatsoever in American markets is young men. We've actively decided that we hate young men in this country. We don't tell them stories about adventures and action that get them to wonder about the type of person they want to be or heroics of any kind. We actively discourage it as toxic. And I understand we're not an actively political podcast, but you might think to yourself, why are young men not reading this? It's because you both made it not for them anymore, and then what you did make has been browbeating them. Guess what Japan understands? There is a huge market of young men that want to read these stories. Guess what we're now addicted to? TikTok. Do you know what's that? You know who that is good for? Nobody. And that's not going to... And having a bunch of messed up young men who don't understand their place in the world, who don't have established stories about heroics and the type of person they might want to be, who have issues with regulating their emotions, that's not good for young men, and that's not good for everybody. That's not good for young women. That's not good for the rest of the country, is young men who are so torn and messed up and can't, don't know their place in the world. It is healthy to tell these type of stories, because it helps young men realize, hey, these are the types of heroics. And by and large, these types of things are built for young men. And we went through such a weird period of time when we decided gendered things are stupid and we need to take all of the stuff that young men love and make it more for the women. And then just destroy the gendered aspect. Japan understands young girls like the romance manga. They do. Yep. And they're very, very, very popular. Young men like the action and adventure. They like imagine why something like an isekai is attractive. And I'm sorry I'm using words. If you're listening to this, you're going, I don't know what an isekai is. An isekai is when a character usually dies in their normal world. Like maybe he's living in Tokyo or something. He dies. A normal businessman or college student or high school student dies and then wakes up in another universe as a new person. Imagine how attractive that is in a world where your life is miserable, nothing's going anywhere. The fantasy of starting again. Starting again as a better person who's stronger, more capable. The fantasy of starting again and not trapped by the past or beaten down by your life or even your bad choices. I mean, what an attractive proposition that is, the fantasy to start again. Young women reading stories about romance and falling in love with senpai and kissing him at the fireworks festival. like it's such a trope, but it's true. And why do they read it over and over again? Because they don't let go of those fantasies. They don't let go of liking those things. You know what's not catering to these things is American comics. They're not helping young men. They're telling them they're bad, and they're making those comics more for young women who don't read comics. And then everybody hates the comics. Japan hasn't gone through this weird brain rot. Believe it or not, there are Japanese homosexual stories, and homosexuals read them. But it's at the front. This is the type of story I'm telling, and this is why it is what it is. And you can pick and choose the type of story you have. There's so much available because they understand their audiences. There is enough of an audience that want to read the homosexual romance stories, and that's fine. What you don't do is try and ham-fist it into every single thing you do. And I think one of the biggest problems in American comics is they are actively destroying their own audiences. They're browbeating the audience that should love their stuff. Young boys are telling them stories that they're bad, or they're telling them stories that aren't attractive to them. And then they're pricing these things too damn high so that young men don't want to buy them. $5 plus for what amounts to 5 pages of an incomplete story and half an ad. Well, what kind of thing is that to buy? In a manga, I get a book with a lot of engaging art and a lot of story. Like, this is your fault. This is the comic book industry's fault. And looking around shocked that things aren't working, you can change it now. You're in charge now, Jim. You can fix these problems. You can tell different stories. You can tell different types of stories. You can present comic books shockingly in a different format. You can do all of these things, but what you can't do is have excuses. That's something you can't have because you're in charge, dude. Sorry, I was getting all heated. The comments on the manga and stuff.
Well, there's a couple things that I wanted to say. One thing, you mentioned that they have, homosexual comics, and they have romance comics, and they have action comics, and they have all these manga, I should say, not comics, manga. The thing is they don't expect the people who are fans of the action comics to be fans of the romance comics, to be fans of the homosexual manga. They each have their own niche, and they're not trying to twist the story to fit in a different niche. They know that the women prefer the romance manga, so they give them that. They know that boys and men prefer the action manga, so they give them that. That there's not this thing where it's like you said, where we have to shoehorn something in where it doesn't belong. It's, you want to do that story? Fine. Here's where we do it. You want to do that story? Fine. Here's where we do that story. And they're different places, and they totally expect that the audience in each of those places to be different. Now, sure, there might be some overlap. There may be some girls who are into romance manga.
Hey, sometimes I think Senpai might notice me.
Yeah. It could be that they have those girls who are fans of romance and action. There could be boys who are fans of action, but they also happen to be homosexual, so they're also attracted to that. But they don't sit there and try to mash them together. They're like, this is this one, this is this one, this is this one, and whoever wants to can go to whatever one they want to go to.
Nah, mash it.
Now, one of the things that he talked about, where they were bringing in new characters, and they were saying that the comic readers were rejecting the new characters. Well, the reason that we come to your comics is for your flagship characters. You've established that that's what you do, that's who you're going to provide us with. And so it's going to be confusing to us if you're suddenly saying, okay, we no longer are going to cater to you. We now have these new characters and you must love them. Why? There is no buildup here. You've just decreed that I am now a fan of this particular character. Why should I be? You have a pedigree, and I realize that you're lamenting the fact that you have this pedigree, but you have a pedigree, and you built that up over years. It's not something that you just throw away. Now, I get it that you're feeling stifled, but as we said, there's nothing that says that you can't introduce a new character, a little bit at a time, and build it. You just want to go from 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds without giving it any time for buildup.
Well, and to be
Or you're
fair,
trying to piggyback off of somebody else that we would rather see anyway.
there's no sort of testing ground for these things that manga has. There's
true.
no testing it out in the waters, growing a fan base, then building a book, and then moving on to more books, and then moving on to an anime. In comic books, it's just like a shotgun of like, hey, we're going to put all of our weight behind this character that people may just hate.
Right. But the thing is that there is a way for them to do this. They could introduce a new character into an established comic. Now, I get it that we don't necessarily like that, because what they do is they try to make it so that that character overshadows whoever we were there to see to begin with. But you can start introducing that character in different team ups, like keep them as a more of a sidekick role, not I'm better than this superhero that you've been coming to see.
To be fair, Jason, they do that a lot.
I know.
A lot. That's pretty much the standard of how they introduce characters, by pigging them back on other stuff. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but you have to take your audience seriously, and treat your characters seriously, and grow them, and as you grow a character who you're trying to gain interest in, not do stupid things or ruin the character or ruin the lore or disrespect it's like, why put in all this effort to build up characters that you're just going to throw under a bus at some point?
Right. But the thing is that, we have like Kamala Khan, and we have Miles Morales, and all these other ones that, they've tried to foist off onto us. If they had introduced them in, like, here we have this character who happens to get involved. It's still a Spider-Man comic. Spider-Man is still the main character. They're just helping out. They can slowly build that, and they can say, okay, well, now we're going to put that character into a Hulk comic, not shoehorn it, but the person gets involved. They don't try to take over Hulk's comic. They try to help out. They play that sidekick role, and over the years they build up that until they can get their own line and everything like that. But they don't want to do that. They want to go from
Jason.
Here's
They do this.
Character,
they do this all the time.
Yeah,
that's how they introduce new characters. Is they piggyback into other characters' stories.
Right, but what I'm saying is they don't piggyback them with the build-up that this is a years in the making project. They do it as in we're piggybacking so we can supplant the character, like we had the Thor with
that's fair.
Jane Foster becoming Thor.
That's fair.
They want to go from here's the new character into you must love this character, not. In a few years, we'll give it time. We'll let the audience see how they react to it. If they like these comics where we're introducing this character and there's an uptick in purchase whenever this character appears, then maybe we can parlay that into its own line. But they don't want to do that. They don't want to wait for that. They want it to go from here we're piggybacking it, and now it's your most favorite thing over Spider-Man or over Avengers or over these pre-established characters that have existed for years.
I think you have a point where they don't play long term, that a lot of it is a lack of patience of waiting to build characters. All of your suggestions they do all of the time. It's a constant thing. They're trying to introduce these characters. And I think why manga serves so much better is if manga were to do it, it would be try small by itself, slowly build up, as opposed to in comic books, it's almost like, here's our character. It's almost like dictated as opposed to organic. Here's our character. Exactly. We're going to build this. This is one that's going to be hyped. And even if they put money behind it and they put time behind it and whatnot, this is the one they chose that people want to be popular. Where as opposed to manga, it's like these individual stories organically grow based on popularity. The problem with the American way of doing things is a lot of the time those characters aren't popular. I mean, Kamala Khan's a good example. She was built specifically said
Mhm.
to be a replacement for Spider-Man, to be a new Spider-Man
Yep.
character. And so instead of making a character who grows organically, that people get behind and slowly expands and maybe gets more, and there's a testing of the water, she's sort of imposed on the group and dictated to the audience, and then everybody hates them. They did all of she appeared in other comics and whatnot. When they had her death, she died in a Spider-Man comic because nobody read Kamala Khan's comics.
Nobody read hers. Yeah.
I mean,
Oops.
your suggestions aren't bad. They do that all of the time. And I think there is a benefit that manga has of the gradual growth of the popularity, which becomes more organic. Believe it or not, there is a lot of failures in manga. But most of the time, they fail at the start, at the early stages, and they don't get very far. And some manga books sort of drag on for years with just enough audience to keep the thing going, and it never grows into maybe an anime or something. And that's also fun.
Right.
But at least there's a testing ground. There's a growth that comic book simply doesn't have. And maybe there should be a rethinking of the industry, that the way they're doing it is not going to work.
And my point mostly was that while they do those things where they put the characters, they introduce them in other comics, they don't just come out. Their problem is that they expect to go from absolutely no support whatsoever to full on support, and I'm now leaving my favorite comic book characters behind, and this new one that you've introduced is my favorite.
Yeah,
if they wanted to make Kamala Khan a replacement for Spider-Man, they could have. It wouldn't have happened overnight. It would have been like a decades-long project.
I don't think it. Well, they don't have the patience
I'm
for
not
that.
saying it would have.
I don't think anyone would have liked her. She's not a character.
No.
She's not a character that's going to be a big seller. She's just not.
No. But I'm just saying that if they had the long-term approach to this, where it's like, sure, we'll do the normal things that we do, but we don't expect her to be super popular overnight. We expect her to grow her fan base a little at a time every year until eventually she's up there with Spider-Man in terms of popularity. But like you said, she's an unlikable character. She's a self-insert rather than an actual creatively based character. And so obviously there are huge problems with her character that aren't going to be fixed by the way that they've done it. But at the same time, if they decided to take this long-term approach, it could have translated into something that they wanted, as opposed to basically they sold a couple of comic books and then canceled her line altogether because nobody read it.
Well, you know what you almost need to do? You have to have a separate comic line that's maybe a bit longer than your average little flimsy papers, where you have like 5 unique stories in that comic of a few pages per character, and then you just keep introduce like new little stories in the universe of Marvel, and they don't always have to be introducing new character, but that's where you would do it. And then just make it interesting enough where they're small ground level, and you can also do like one of the little short stories is maybe a small story of Spider-Man helping a kid who's having trouble in school, or but small individual stories, and that's where you can introduce. And guess what? If that character kind of sucks and people don't receive it, no skin off your back. It's a 5 tiny stories and a bit of a longer comic that they sell once a month.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
But it's like
you could get some experimental stuff out there, see how it goes. If people really like it, then you start investing more into more resources into that thing.
Yep.
But that's not what they do.
But I'm just stealing this from a sort of manga style. So like this shouldn't be a confusing setup, and you could just throw in a little Captain America story, a little Spider-Man, enough to get people to buy it so that they can be exposed to more of the characters they love. Yes, essentially. But you do it in a short comic book format. Do it in a short comic book format. But once again, I am not the most brilliant person, and I understand the industry better than Jim Lee. But guess who? Jim Lee, who's embedded in the industry and has been there forever, who's a rock star, who's in charge of DC. Well, whatever you're doing ain't working. So maybe times to shift the plan or do things. Ross, you've been quiet. What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, and I like, again, not the biggest comic fan, partially because they made the choice when I was a kid to not sell them where I have anything, like where I live out in the middle of nowhere. I grew up out in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't get comics, so I didn't get into them. And part of that's the choices they made. They made the choice to distribute them very small. And part of it, like, and it is just a reality of, like, they've had sales start dropping off, what, in the 90s, at least early thousands.
After the crash,
Yeah, and all they've done is, like, well, covers, different covers, see? Collectors, you gotta, like, it's all, like...
Yeah, that worked in the 90s.
Yeah, and it did, but then they keep doing it. And they keep doing it. And they keep, and like, Death of Superman, well, that worked, well, we're gonna keep doing it. We're gonna keep, like... And look, every industry does this to some degree. And the healthy ones learn to change. I mean, if they're real healthy, they avoid it to begin with. That's hard. I get that. But, the healthy ones will go like, yeah, maybe we should try something else. Maybe we should start trying something else, even on a small scale. And they just don't seem to do that. And when they do try, it's with things that are a bad idea to begin with. I don't know. It's such a baffling industry. I just remember finding out in the midst of MCU mega money that there was like no crossover with the comics at all. And it's just like, like the choices you guys make are just terrible. Like, how do you not take these opportunities when they're handed to you on a silver platter? It's baffling. I mean, let alone creativity, you didn't need it. But on top of that, they aren't creative. They refuse to change things, and now here they are.
Well, you notice how Jim Lee makes the comment of, well, American, they could do all of these different type of stories because the Japanese readers are different and they want different things, and that American readers just aren't interested in those sorts of things. Essentially, what he suggested. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth.
Which is a complete.
Well, here's the thing. Do you know what's popular in America? Manga.
Yeah.
Look.
Do you know why manga is having such a boom? Because Americans are getting into it.
And
getting into it.
The American comic book industry is not serving the American public, the consumers. Look, just writing a comic that's maybe a bit more for an older crowd or even more adult doesn't mean that it has to be rife with excessive violence and edgelordy or even nudity or anything. But stories that are more traditional, that take their audiences seriously and not for granted, would go a shockingly long way.
Yeah.
And introducing these things, like there's nothing that says Marvel or DC, and DC in Jim Lee's case, that DC can't start publishing manga. Who says you can do that? Manga that's maybe more for an American audience. But to be fair, making something more for the modern American audience is probably not going to get you money because you're chasing an audience that just isn't. Why are we consuming manga? Is because they're telling stories you're not. They're telling fun adventure stories or telling fun stories that you're not. And you're losing this game because of what you're doing. You're leaving money on the table because you can't understand that you don't understand your audience anymore, and you have no way to connect to your audience anymore. This is a failure top down in that industry, and you need to rethink how you approach it. You need to go top down and be like, you know what, we're going to do things different. We're gonna shift it, but whatever you got to do. What you're doing ain't working. And if I felt listening to him and reading his comments and stuff, there was a huge disconnect and misunderstanding about the inherent problems. It's almost like the problem of being inside an industry. You can't fairly look at it the way somebody standing outside of it can. As someone who loves superheroes and comic books, I haven't bought a superhero comic, at least remotely modern, for a decade or two now. Why? Because you ruined them. I hated the stories you were telling, and they were too expensive. And I walked away. And this shouldn't be surprising. Like, you should understand why you're losing long-term fans. Instead of just, well, we don't want those type of fans. I think you do. Famously, you had the a Marvel writer, I can't remember what her name is, but people talking about how much they hate her stuff. And she goes, well, if you don't like my stories, don't read my book. And people chose not to read her book. That's what's so stupid about these audiences is it's the sort of indifferent mocking of like, well, whatever. If you don't like it, then take a hike. You desperately need those people to read your stuff. Why are you mocking the audience that you have? Well, we could live without you. You can't. You cannot live without them. No. Every time you try and tell different stories, you turn away your established audience, and those are the people who are keeping our lights on. Just to remind you what happened with the Marvel movies. They started to shift to the comics people weren't reading, and they thought that people were going to watch these movies, and they didn't. What happened in like every industry goes through these problems. Why do you sit here and scratch your chin and be like, why is manga doing well? Oh, come on. Are you so up your own butt that you can't understand what's happening here? Why manga is able to serve audiences better than American comic books? And manga, not just Japan. He says specifically, specifically for their audience, manga's popular everywhere.
Yeah.
I am interested in reading stuff from a culture that's not mine, because my culture sucks balls and they can't write anything.
Well, and can I just say, it's like alarming that we are in the year 2026 and the guy that runs DC is acting like he just now found out about manga. What the hell kind of like head of a company are you? Isn't that like one of the jobs of leadership of these companies is to see what the competition is doing? Is to understand what the competition even is? You know what I mean? Like, how is that?
Yeah.
What's this newfangled manga you speak of?
Yeah. No wonder your industry's in the pisser. Like, are you joking? I just... Listen, if this was 2012, it would, like, okay, fair enough. You're, like, maybe a little late to the game, because, like, manga isn't huge yet, but it's getting more popular. But, like, it would still be like well, alright, you just noticed? Wow. Like, how are you not... I mean, even just... Do you not care about the medium? How are you not just sampling this to begin with? Like, it's just... There's so many questions that come to my mind about the quality of leadership. Like, no offense to Mr. Lee. Not, like, I don't mean to be rude, but, like, Like, I don't know. It's just so bizarre to me, because if I look at it from, like, a corporate sense, it's like, well, how do you not care or, like, want to know exactly what, or at least fairly accurately, what the competition is up to, what they're doing, their numbers, blah, 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 blah. And then, well, he was an artist. Okay, well, then from an artist's perspective, not that I'm much of an artist at all, but because I'm not, but whenever I, like, see artists of any kind, music or, drawing, paint, whatever, like, video games, they like to see what other people are doing, because they like the medium. Well, apparently Jim Lee didn't care. Like, what? How are you not, from either side of your reality, the artist or the corporate guy, how are you not understanding this, like, before 2025, 2026? Like,
to be fair, at least to some degree, he was probably very aware of manga, and this is his first coming to terms of, well, they're working for some reason and we're not. And it's like, really?
Well, the thing is that... Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, like, I hope it's just that and not like, oh my god, because this comes off as, well, man, this new manga thing, huh? And it's like, new.
Who was it? Was it Zaslav or Bob Iger? It might have been Bob Iger, who basically was like, well, have you heard of these video games? And it's like, oh,
Yeah,
come
God,
on.
yeah. Like, what? Yeah, your company's been involved with them forever. What are you talking about?
You know they're really hot right now.
I mean, it's like not to derail by any means, but like it's like when AEW was first getting their deal with Warner, and the people in charge of Warner didn't know that they used to have the big competition to WWE. And it's like, listen, even if you weren't a wrestling fan, you don't care. How do you not know the history of your company well enough to know that like you gave WWE a run for their money and like scared the shit out of them? Like, how do you not know this? How do you not know this before going into the meeting with the guy wanting to sell you wrestling on your TV? What? You didn't do any research? What the fuck?
Well, and you also ask questions as to the people in charge, like, how much do you really pay attention?
Yeah, like, oh my god. Like, I'm not saying you gotta be an expert in the booking or whatever, but like, going into a meeting, you didn't understand any of the history of this thing at all, or your company's history with it. I mean, again, just this one point, and I'll be done with this point, but Turner, before it was a cable station, when it was a super station, it was built on wrestling. Anyway, sorry, just baffling. Just completely, what incompetence.
Yeah, the fact that it feels like he's just discovered manga at this point, and it's like, well, it's been around for years. It's slowly built up its popularity in the United States to the point where it's overtaking American comic book sales. I'm not saying that you should have said, well, obviously we need to do something about manga, but they could have been learning from it all this time. It feels like, it's there. We all see it, but they just don't think that it's going to affect their industry at all. It's like, oh, it's comics from overseas. It's not going to impact the United States. It'll never get that big.
It's like the good times are going to roll forever attitude that a lot of these industries have had. What weird, confusing thing that expecting streaming to go on forever. And it's like, did you realize that spike was COVID and everybody had to watch TV? Anyway.
Yeah.
Just wouldn't let us do anything else, dang it.
Just confusing commentary from a guy in the industry that should have a lot more awareness of the position he's in. Well, I don't know why people are... What was it? They... I want to say it was Batman, that one of the heads in DC, they couldn't get any of their comics sold, and he was expressing his bafflement that the highest sold comic was reprints of the original Batman from like the beginning.
Oh yeah, it was a few years ago, huh? A few years ago.
And it's like, you're confused at this? This should tell you that people hate the current stuff. Hate it.
Yep.
I don't know why this is confusing to you.
God.
Just print some new Action Comics 1 or whatever from when Superman shows up. It'll sell. You know what's not going to sell? Your recent stuff.
At all.
It's just, you don't understand your audience, and you're chasing an audience that doesn't like you. Blah, blah, blah. We've been over this. Anyway, that was the headliner for today. I was baffled at Jim Lee's commentary. I was like, what are you talking about? You could do all of this right now. You could tell these stories today. What are you talking about? All right, Jimothy.